They've vanished without a trace. A grandfather, a grandmother, and 2 children. Gone from a winter cabin, no bodies, no clues, just silence. For 18 years, the snow kept it secret, until someone came back. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just a mystery. It's a story about memory, silence, and the truth we're sometimes forced to. The snow didn't fall gently that morning. Heavy, wet, clinging to everything like a memory that refused to melt. Eleanor Monroe stepped out of the rented Jeep just as the engine died. The silence that followed was louder than the road behind her. She stared at the old cabin, half buried in snow, weather-beaten, tired and quiet. 18 years of silence. And now... The wind picked up, whistling through the pine trees like it was trying to warn her. But Ellie had stopped listening to warnings the day her family vanished. She took a breath. Cold air stabbed her lungs. No one had stepped foot here since the search teams gave up. Since the headlines went from family missing in snowstorm to likely dead, no new leads. Since she stopped believing adults would ever tell her the truth. She hadn't come back for closure. She came back because of what her mother said just before dying. It wasn't the storm, Ellie. It was the tunnel. Ellie never got the chance to ask what she meant. Her mother's breath left her before the words could return. And now, with both parents gone, and the deed to the property arriving in an envelope with her name misspelled, she was here, at the edge of the forest, at the edge of everything she ever tried. The first step toward the cabin crunched with weight. Inside, the air tasted like old smoke and wet dust. The door creaked open just enough for her to slide through. Cold seeped in instantly, as if the house recognized her and decided to show her everything she'd been missing. The living room was still intact, the same brown recliner, the same cracked lamp. The fireplace blackened with time, and the smell, that bitter, sour scent, made her stomach twist. She dropped her duffel bag by the door. Dust bloomed in the air like smoke from a gunshot. She scanned the room. The red wool blanket was still on the arm of the sofa, folded just the way her grandmother always kept it. There was still an old Polaroid photo tucked into the picture frame above the mantel. Ellie reached for it, hands trembling slightly. It was them. The last photo. Grandpa Thomas, arms crossed. Grandma Elsie, smile thin and tired. Josh and Emily, her cousins, grinning and bundled in snow gear. And her, young Ellie, in the center, staring dead into the camera, not smiling. Behind them, in the photo, was the back wall of the cabin. Except something was off. There was a dark line in the wooden wall just behind Grandpa's elbow. A thin outline, like a seam. A door? She looked up at the real wall in front of her. It was solid, seamless, covered in bookshelves now. She frowned. The only sound in the cabin was the ticking of the old brass clock in the kitchen, frozen at 2:46 a.m. She turned to the kitchen. Everything was still there, plates stacked, silverware untouched. But the refrigerator door was slightly ajar, just enough to reveal that the inside was empty. Ellie shivered. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in memory, and this place was saturated in it. She moved through the house slowly. The hallway to the back bedrooms felt narrower than she remembered. The walls were marked with thin scratches, like something heavy had once been dragged through. She paused outside the first door, the kids' room. Inside, the twin beds were still made. A baseball glove sat on the windowsill, frozen stiff. A small red shoe rested under the bed. Josh's. Ellie reached for it, but stopped halfway. She remembered the police searching that room, remembered the dogs sniffing everything, remembered the sound of her own voice saying over and over, "They didn't leave, they didn't leave, they didn't leave." No one had listened. She sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress sighed beneath her. That smell again, a mix of pine, dust, and something faintly metallic. Then something caught her eye. A corner of the rug lifted slightly. She knelt, pulled it back, wooden floorboards beneath, and one of them was loose. Her breath caught, not in fear, in familiarity. She had dreamed this for years. Her fingers worked carefully, prying the board up. It resisted, then gave with a dull creak. A gust of air rose up from the darkness below, colder than outside. She blinked. There was something underneath. She reached into the hole. A metal handle. She pulled. Wood shifted. Dust exploded in her face. A square panel lifted with groans of rusted hinges, revealing stairs, crude, hand-carved, leading into the dark. A tunnel. Her heart pounded. She stumbled back. This was it. This was what her mother had meant. She grabbed her phone. The flashlight flickered on. She pointed it down the stairs. The beam hit damp stone, then vanished into pitch. She should have run, but instead she whispered, "Grandpa." No answer, just the sound of snow shifting on the roof, or maybe something beneath the floor. As she stepped toward the stairs, the silence was broken, not by her own breath, but by a sound below, a child's laugh, faint and familiar. Ellie Monroe had learned how to live without answers. She just hadn't learned how to stop needing them. Growing up in the shadow of a family tragedy turns you into two people, the one the world sees, composed, quiet, high-functioning, and the one you bury deep down, the one who still wakes up screaming at 2:46 a.m. That was the time stamped on the kitchen clock in the cabin, the time the police believed the power had gone out, the time her memory fractured. Ellie was only 13 when the snowstorm came, when her grandparents, her two younger cousins, and an entire future were swallowed by that place. She had survived, somehow, found outside, barefoot in the snow, face down near the woodshed, barely breathing. She remembered almost nothing, only flashes, the flickering of the lantern light, a hand pulling hers, a door in the floor, and then the cold, the darkness, the sirens. After the tragedy, Ellie was moved to Sacramento to live with her aunt, a woman she barely knew who smelled of lavender and grief, and who kept the news on mute whenever Ellie walked into the room. At school, people whispered, "She's the one from the cabin." They didn't ask questions to help. They asked because they wanted to feel lucky that it. So Ellie did what survivors do. She went quiet. She drew lines in notebooks. She counted floor tiles. She stared at doorknobs and thought about time, about what it meant to vanish and what it meant to be left behind. Years passed. Ellie became an expert at pretending she was fine. She graduated, studied architecture, built a life from the ruins. But every winter she'd feel it, that tug in her chest when the temperature dropped. The sound of snow brushing against the window pane, the smell of pine. It always pulled her back. She dated, never seriously. Trust was complicated when you knew how fast a person could disappear. She worked in restoration, spending her days in abandoned buildings, listening to the way silence settled in forgotten spaces. People thought it was morbid. But to her it felt honest. Empty houses didn't lie. 3 weeks before returning to the cabin, Ellie sat in a hospice room holding her mother's hand. Rebecca Monroe had been a strong woman once, smart, tough, the kind who ironed napkins and never cried in public. Cancer took her quickly, like a thief. And in her final days she was barely recognizable, sunken cheeks, trembling hands, eyes glassy but restless. That day she'd stared at the ceiling for hours. Then, suddenly, she turned to Ellie and whispered, "It wasn't the storm, Ellie. It was the tunnel. Your grandfather built it." Ellie had leaned in, heart pounding. What tunnel? Her mother tried to speak again, but the breath was already gone. That was the last thing she ever said. For days after the funeral, Ellie couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. She didn't even know the cabin had a tunnel. It had never come up in the investigation, not once in the police reports or articles. No blueprints, no speculation. And her grandfather? Thomas Monroe had been a retired civil engineer, quiet, odd, a man of routines, he built the cabin himself in the 1980s, entirely by hand. He claimed it was to get away from the world, but Ellie's father used to say it was because Thomas didn't trust the government. Dad used to measure his cereal, her father once joked. Said if you didn't track everything, you'd miss the signs. After the disappearance, Thomas was cast as a protective patriarch, someone who got caught in the storm trying to save his family. But now Ellie wondered, what if he hadn't failed to save them? What if he was the reason they disappeared? She didn't tell anyone she was going back to the cabin, not even her sister, Allie, who would have begged her not to go. Allie had always coped differently, by forgetting, by building walls, by calling it an accident and moving on. She lived in Phoenix now, married, 2 kids. She refused to let her children hear the story of the Winter House. They didn't even know their cousins' names. That made Ellie feel sick, because Josh and Emily weren't just cousins. They were hers. They were giggles and chocolate milk and snow angels and board games. They were warm hands and louder footsteps. They were family. No graves, no answers, just that house, rotting in silence, and a tunnel no one had ever spoken. Back in the cabin, Ellie stood in the kids' bedroom, the loose floorboards still pulled up. The stairs below seemed older than the rest of the house, hand-dug, uneven. The wood was damp and cracked, reeking faintly of mildew and something harder to name. Rust, maybe, or blood. She hadn't gone down yet. Instead, she sat on the bed, clutching the small red shoe she'd found on. It still had Josh's name written on the sole in faded marker. She remembered writing it. All caps, black Sharpie. Her throat tightened. She used to believe that memory was a gift. Now she thought maybe it was a punishment. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the fire, watching it flicker. The cabin creaked and moaned with every gust of wind. Shadows crawled across the floor. The clock on the kitchen wall still read 2:46 a.m. despite the batteries she had just replaced. She checked her phone. No signal. Not surprising. The nearest town was miles away. She tried to write in her journal, but every time she touched the pen to paper, her hand would tremble. So instead, she dug through an old box of belongings, left a broken music box, a snow globe with no water, and then, labeled in her grandfather's handwriting, December 2007, do not play. Her breath hitched. She pulled out the old cassette player she'd found earlier, loaded the tape, and pressed play. Static. Then a voice. Her grandfather's. If you're hearing this, I didn't make. And neither did they. Ellie dropped the shoe. This place isn't what you think it is. There's more underneath. I built it to protect them, but I think it's become something else. If she's listening, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I had to. The tape clicked. Ended. She sat frozen. Who was she? Why build a tunnel? What did he mean? Something else. And then came the real blow. Rewinding the tape, she noticed something faint in the background, behind her grandfather's voice. Faint, muffled, distorted, children's laughter, and a voice that sounded like her own. She stared at the open floor, heart pounding. The tunnel wasn't just a passage. It was a memory she had buried, a piece of the story she lived and forgot. And now it was calling her back. The tunnel had waited long enough. Ellie stood at the top of the stairs for what felt like hours, flashlight trembling in her grip. The sound, that child's laugh, had faded. But the echo of it stayed, wrapped around her spine like a cold hand. She finally descended. Each step groaned under her weight. The beam from her phone barely touched the walls, which were made of rough-hewn stone and reinforced with wood beams. Her grandfather's work, no doubt. The air smelled thick with earth and mildew, cold, ancient. 10 steps, 20. Then flat ground. The tunnel stretched out in both directions, but to the left, a door, a wooden hatch, half rotted, but still shut tight. She approached, heart thudding, ran her fingers along the frame. The hinges were rusty. The handle, covered in grime, had a piece of cloth tied to it, blue and frayed. Her throat closed. It was from Josh's scarf. The door groaned as it opened. The room was small, low ceiling, one cot, one oil lamp, a table covered in papers, a filing cabinet shoved into the corner, on the wall a drawing, childlike, made with colored pencils. A family standing by the cabin surrounded by trees. And above them, in red crayon, one word, safe. Ellie stared at it, numb. The air shifted behind her. She turned fast, but no one was there, just silence, and dust dancing in the beam of her flashlight. She backed out slowly. Her foot struck something soft. She looked down, a stuffed rabbit, torn ear, burned on one side. Emily's. Back in the main tunnel, Ellie's thoughts spiraled. She hadn't imagined the laughter, or the scarf, or the rabbit. This wasn't an empty tunnel. It was a shelter. But from what? The next morning Ellie drove into Truckee. The sky was overcast, the air brittle with cold. The downtown looked the same. Mom-and-pop shops, worn sidewalks, street lamps wrapped in garland left over from Christmas. But the people looked older, closed, like they knew how to forget. She walked into the general store. The bell chimed. An old man behind the counter glanced up. "Help you?" She smiled, tentative. "You used to know my grandparents, Thomas and Elsie Monroe." He froze. "Monroe?" he said, slower. "The cabin folks?" She nodded. The man cleared his throat. "Thought nobody'd come back up there after what happened. I just inherited the place." He stared. "You were the girl, the one they found outside." She nodded again, softer this time. A long silence passed. Then he said, "Some folks still think they never left." "Excuse me." He looked around, lowered his voice. "I knew Tom. He wasn't right in the head. Talked about the government coming for him. Used to say there were plans in place if things went bad. Thought they were watching him." Ellie felt the blood drain from her hands. "What kind of plans?" The man hesitated. "Told me once he dug a hole. Said he could hide his whole family down there, if need be." She swallowed. "Did you tell the police?" He shrugged. "No one listens to old men talking crazy." She left the store with more questions than answers. That afternoon she searched through boxes left behind in the cabin, journals, maps, letters. One journal had a page folded twice. When she opened it, a note fell out. "If you're reading this, the plan failed. I couldn't protect them. The tunnel wasn't enough." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was her grandfather's. The map attached showed the cabin, and 3 tunnels beneath it. The one she entered was labeled T1. There were 2 more. The second tunnel, T2, was hidden under the living room. She had to tear up part of the floor to reach it. This one was narrower, damper, the air heavier. It led to a dead end. But scrawled on the wall in charcoal was a date. 12/13/11. Still here, not safe yet. Below it, smeared in what looked like rust or blood, were fingerprints, child-sized. She stumbled back, nausea rising. She called her sister that night. Allie picked up on the 3rd ring. "Ellie?" Her voice was surprised. "Guarded." "I'm at the cabin," Ellie said. A pause, then, "Jesus, Ellie, why?" "I found something, a tunnel, maybe more than one." Allie exhaled loudly. "Please don't do this again. We've lived through it already." "No, we haven't," Ellie said. "We survived it." Allie's voice sharpened. "You don't know what you're looking for." Then Allie whispered, "Did you find the Polaroid?" Ellie's blood froze. "Why?" "Because I remember something. From the night they vanished." Ellie's heart pounded. "I heard Grandpa say, 'Get her out of here.' Then the door shut. I thought I dreamed it. You never told anyone. I thought you needed me to forget." Later that night, Ellie found something strange. The firewood pile outside had been moved, and on the snow nearby, only one footprint, small, like a child's. But no trail, just one, pressed deep facing the cabin. She didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, she met Nate Harrow. He was working trail maintenance off Donner Pass Road. Tall, quiet, beard peppered with snow. "You Monroe?" he asked when she showed up. She nodded. "I remember you. We were in the same class, 8th grade." Ellie studied his face. Familiar, but distant. "I need help digging," she said. "There's something under the cabin, something big." "What?" "I don't know, but I think my grandfather built more than just tunnels." They dug for hours. By sunset, they uncovered the third entrance, T3. It led to a chamber, inside cots, cans of food, a lantern, a shelf of children's books, and on the wall in chalk, 6 tally marks. Someone had been keeping count, and on the back wall, carved into the wood, a name, Emily. Ellie's hands shook. She pressed her palm against it, still warm. Nate stood behind her, breath caught. "Ellie," he said, "look." She turned. There at the far end of the tunnel, a pair of eyes stared back, wide, unblinking, and then disappeared into the dark. There were eyes in the dark. Ellie saw them, she was sure. They had stared back when wide wet, blinking once, before retreating into the void of the tunnel. Human eyes, childlike. But when she and Nate ran toward them, they found nothing, just the damp floor, scratched walls, and a torn page from a children's book, Peter Rabbit, the corner chewed off. They searched the chamber for hours. No new passages, no footprints, nothing but silence, and the echo of Ellie's pounding heart. "Could have been an animal," Nate said, not believing his own words. Ellie shook her head. It was her. Emily. He didn't argue, but his eyes tightened. The next day, Ellie called the only person who had ever tried to solve the case, Detective Jim Blackwood, now retired, 63, living in a trailer park 2 towns over. He picked up on the second ring. "You're still alive," he said. Ellie didn't laugh. "I found a tunnel," she said. 3, actually. Then, "I figured." She froze. "You what?" "I told your father. Back then. Told him your grandpa had a damn bunker system under that place. But he made me swear never to bring it up again." "Why?" "Because he knew," Blackwood whispered, "and he was scared." She drove out to meet him that afternoon. The man looked smaller now, weary, like someone who carried too many things too long. He poured them coffee, black, no sugar. "I'll tell you everything I know," he said, "but it won't bring 'em back." "I don't care," they said. "I need the truth." He nodded, then began. Thomas Monroe, her grandfather, had once been contracted by the U.S. government during the Cold War, engineering fallout shelters, tunnels, hidden passageways. After he retired, he grew paranoid, bought land near Truckee, built the cabin and the tunnels beneath it. The files from the 2007 disappearance had never been closed, but Blackwood said the case had dead-ended before it ever began. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle, no footprints leaving the scene. "But I was found outside," Ellie said. He nodded. "Unconscious, in the snow, no shoes, but no trauma, not even frostbite." She blinked. "That's not possible." Blackwood leaned forward. "Exactly." He showed her photos. From the original investigation, the family's last dinner, plates full, wine bottle half empty, no signs of panic. Then one photo stopped her. It was the Polaroid, the same one she had in the cabin, but this one was different. On the bottom corner, scrawled in faint pencil, were numbers: 39 3470 de Bian, 120 2040 DW coordinates. She pulled out her phone, mapped it. A clearing 4 miles east of the cabin. Nate agreed to go with her. They hiked through snow and brush, Ellie gripping the photo like a compass. When they reached the spot, there was nothing but trees, until Nate called out, "Ellie, here!" A small wooden marker, almost rotted through. It had letters burned into it. Find her! She knelt beside it, and just beneath the snow, a lockbox. Inside, a roll of undeveloped film, a child's mitten, a folded napkin with a drawing, a tunnel, and 4 stick figures inside it, one with an X over the head. They brought the film to be developed the next morning. While they waited, Ellie sat with Nate in the back of the diner, staring out the window. "Do you remember Josh?" she asked. Nate nodded. "Used to throw snowballs at me every recess." He used to hum when he was nervous. I could hear it through the walls. Nate looked at her. "Do you still hear it?" She nodded. "Last night, coming from the tunnel." When the photos came back, they showed a series of images, grainy, dim, but real. The inside of the main tunnel, the children sleeping on cots, a table with canned food, and in the last photo, her grandfather, Thomas Monroe, holding a finger to his lips. Behind him, standing in the shadows, was Ellie, at 8, staring into the camera. Her head spun. She had no memory of it, no recollection of being in that room. But there she was, alive, alert, and she called Allie again. This time, her sister cried. "I remember more now," she whispered. "I remember waking up that night, and Dad was gone. Then I heard Mom say, 'We can't keep covering for him.'" "Covering what?" Ellie. She knew about the tunnels. She knew what Grandpa was doing. "And the kids," Allie continued. I think he took them down there. Why? I don't know. Why leave me outside? I think maybe he didn't." That night, Ellie walked back into the main tunnel alone. She sat in the chamber, the walls closing in, and then a sound, soft, familiar, humming, a child's hum. She rose slowly. "Josh?" she whispered. No answer. Then, from the far corner, a knock. 3 times, tap, tap, tap. She turned the flashlight toward it and saw a door. She hadn't noticed it before. She crossed the room, pulled it open. Inside, the walls were covered in drawings, hundreds, all made in crayon, children, trees. The cabin, the word home written over and over, and in the center of the floor, a blanket, still warm. She reached down, and underneath the blanket, a photograph of the kids. But they weren't little anymore. They were older, teenagers, and still in the tunnel, still alive. The photo didn't lie, and that made it worse. Ellie stared at it under the dim tunnel light, her hands trembling, breath caught halfway between denial and belief. Josh and Emily. But older, teenagers. They stood in front of the same tunnel wall she'd just found, same graffiti, same chalk mark. Josh was taller, jaw. Emily's face, still soft, now had shadows beneath. The photo wasn't from 2007. It was recent. Her mind spiraled. Where had it come from? Why had someone hidden it beneath a blanket? And the biggest question, were they still here? Nate stared at the picture over her shoulder. "This can't be real," he whispered. "They'd be, what, 25? Josh would be 27, Ellie said. Emily, 24. They're alive? I don't know." She looked at him. "But someone took this photo." They searched the chamber again, now frantic, found a torn notebook under a pile of cloth. Inside were pages filled with cramped handwriting. "We can't leave. He says it's not safe. We hear them above us, but he says they don't look for us anymore." There was no signature. But the handwriting? Ellie knew it. It was hers. She fell back against the tunnel wall. Nate crouched beside her. "Ellie." "No," she muttered. "No, this isn't right. I don't remember writing this. I don't remember anything like this." Nate didn't speak. Ellie pulled the blanket tighter around herself and closed her eyes. And then it hit her. Not a memory. A smell. Wood smoke, pine sap, metal, and a voice. Soft, calm, male. "You can't go out there, Elle. It's too late." Another voice. "Young." "But it's morning. You said just one more night." You know the rule. Then Ellie's own voice, small, trembling. They think we're dead. She opened her eyes, gasped. The memory was real. They'd been in the tunnel. Not for hours, not for days, for weeks. Maybe months. And she had helped keep them there. I was with them, she said, voice shaking. After the night they disappeared, I was in this tunnel. I was part of it. Nate stared at her. I don't understand. Ellie stood, pacing. My grandfather didn't kidnap them. He hid them from someone. Who? I don't know, she whispered. But I think I helped. Ellie, she turned to him, eyes wide. Don't you see, I wasn't found outside the cabin by accident. I was put there. By who? She paused, then said, by me. The revelation haunted her the rest of the night. If she had helped hide them and then erase the memory, what else had she forgotten? The answer came the next morning, when the letter arrived. It was slid under the cabin door. No return address, just her name on the envelope. Ellie. Inside, a single page, handwritten. If you're reading this, you found the tunnels. That means it's time. They're not gone, but they won't come back until you remember everything. You promised to forget. Now you have to choose. There was no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was hers. She showed it to Nate. He said nothing at first, then asked, Do you think your grandfather made you forget? I think I did, she replied, on purpose. To protect them? To protect me. They returned to the main chamber that afternoon. Ellie stood in the center, eyes closed, breathing deep. She focused on the details, the chalk drawings, the bedding, the shelves, and then she saw it, a pattern. The same 4 drawings, repeated over and over. The cabin, the woods. A man at the tunnel door, and a 5th figure with a red X through the face. Ellie stepped forward. That figure, it was always drawn with longer hair. A girl. Emily? She realized, heart pounding, it was her. She whispered, They blamed me. Nate looked up. Who? Josh, Emily, the others, they thought I betrayed them. They left you outside. No, Ellie said slowly. I left. I chose to go. I left them behind. Another memory broke through, screaming, Josh crying, Emily clinging to her sleeve, and her, Ellie, running up the tunnel stairs toward the hatch, her grandfather grabbing her arm. No, if you open that door, they'll see us. But she yanked away, climbed, kicked the hatch open, and snow rushed in like a wave. She had been the one who exposed them, the one who ended the plan. Her grandfather had built the tunnels to protect them, from who she still didn't know. But she had panicked, fled, let the world in. And then she forgot. But someone else hadn't. That night another note appeared, taped to her car windshield. There's one more tunnel, the one you sealed. Ellie stared at the message, the wind ripping it from her hand. And in the distance, just past the tree line, a figure stood, still, silent, watching her. Then slowly it raised its hand and waved. The figure didn't move. Ellie stood frozen by the tree line, wind slicing through her jacket, the message still echoing in her hand. There's one more tunnel, the one you sealed. She stepped forward. The figure stepped back, then vanished. She ran, Nate behind her, through the crunching snow, but when they reached the clearing, no one was there, just silence, and, half buried in the snow, a small wooden birdhouse, shattered. Painted across its roof, almost worn away. We were safe until you left. That night Ellie couldn't stop shaking, not from the cold, from memory. She pulled out the old cassette player again, replayed the tape of her grandfather's voice. She listened closely this time, every breath, every pause. At one point, he whispered something under his breath. You'll remember when it's time. She sat by the fire, staring at the kitchen, still frozen at 2:40. Then, without looking, she reached under the floorboard where she had found the first tunnel. Nothing. But something told her to try again. She pulled the next board beside it. Beneath, a trap door. Not the first one, not the main tunnel, another. This one was deeper, narrower, dirtier. And at the bottom, a door. Unlike the others, this one was metal. Bolted from the outside. Ellie's hands trembled as she unlocked it. It opened with a hiss. Inside, silence, darkness, and then breathing. A figure stepped out of the shadows, thin, pale, eyes hollow. Josh. He stared at her like a ghost. And then, in a voice so small it broke her in two, "I told you not to come back." She dropped to her knees. "Josh?" she whispered. Another voice behind him. Emily, older, hardened. "You remembered," she said. Ellie nodded, crying. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't—" Emily raised a hand. "You left." "I thought I was helping." "You chose them." "No," Ellie said. "I chose survival. I thought I could bring help." Josh's voice cracked. No one ever came. Nate stepped forward. Josh tensed. "Who's that?" he asked. Ellie wiped her face. "A friend." Emily narrowed her eyes. "There are no friends outside." "Please," Ellie said. "Let me explain. Let me make this right." Emily hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The room was small, cramped, mattresses, crates, a makeshift kitchen, drawings on the walls, years of lives lived underground. "How long?" Ellie asked softly. 18 years, Emily replied, "but we only stopped counting after 10. "Why didn't you leave?" Josh up. "We tried." "Then why—" "They were watching," Emily interrupted. "We weren't supposed to exist. Grandpa said we had to stay hidden until it was safe, until you came back." Ellie's eyes filled again. Emily nodded. "He made you forget, with drugs, hypnosis, I don't know, but you left. And the door closed behind you. We thought you were dead." The next hours blurred. They talked, cried, argued. Emily's rage boiled beneath the surface. Josh tried to soften things, but the hurt ran deep. "You lived your life," Emily said. "We lost ours." "I didn't live," Ellie whispered. "I froze." Nate spoke up. "What do you want now?" Emily looked at Ellie. "We want to be real again." Ellie nodded. "Then come home." Josh said nothing. Emily looked at him, then said, "There's something else." They led her to the far wall. A curtain hung there, torn blanket nailed to stone. Behind it, a body. Wrapped in a sheet, dried. "Grandpa," Josh whispered. "He died 10 years ago. We buried him here." Ellie stared at the shape. "We couldn't carry him out," Emily said. "He said you would come, that you'd know what to do." Ellie dropped to her knees and wept. They emerged just before sunrise. Josh and Emily blinked in the morning light, skin pale, arms shielding their eyes. Ellie stood beside them, trembling. Nate waited in silence, then walked up, nodded, just presence. At the cabin, Ellie opened every window. "Let the light in," breathed deep. Emily stood in the doorway. "It smells like him," Josh nodded. "And her cooking." Ellie smiled, then froze. On the table, a photo, not one she had left. A new one, Josh, Emily, Ellie, together, taken now. There was no camera, just the photo. Fresh, unaged, real. She turned, but no one was there, just the sound of the clock behind her. Ticking, for the first time in 18 years. 2:47. Josh looked at her. "Are you going to tell the world?" Ellie didn't answer, then slowly turned toward the window, where a car was parked, unmarked, waiting, and a figure inside watching. She hadn't seen the cabin since the snow swallowed her family. Now she was leaving it again, but not the same way. Not as a survivor, not as the girl who forgot. She was walking away as someone who remembered, who stayed, and then chose to return. Josh and Emily sat in the back seat of Nate's truck, heads tilted against the windows, eyes too heavy for the sun. They hadn't said much since they surfaced. but they didn't need to. Some wounds speak louder in silence. Ellie sat in the passenger seat, staring at the trees by, each one a ghost, a whisper, a version of herself. She still hadn't told them what she planned to do, whether to speak, whether to stay, whether the world deserved to know what really happened. At a gas station, Josh got out to. Emily stayed in the truck. Ellie walked into the bath and stared at herself. She looked older than yesterday, or maybe just on. There were lines around her eye. On the paper towel dispenser, T.M., her grandfather. She reached up and pressed her fingers against the letters, then whispered, "You tried, I see that now, but we still paid the price." Back at the cabin, the wind moved through the trees like a breath held too long. Inside, the clock ticked quietly, steady. Nate returned that evening to close up the tunnels. They didn't seal them. They just closed the doors. Some truths, once found, don't need to be buried again. They only need to be named. 2 days later, Ellie received a letter. No return address. Inside, a single sentence. Not everyone wants the truth. Some survive because it stays buried. And under that, a photograph. Her as a child, holding Josh's hand. Both smiling. The photo had never existed. She kept it in her jacket pocket. But to remind herself, sometimes the past survives. At her mother's grave, Ellie sat alone. She placed a pine cone on the headstone, one from the path behind the. "I remembered," she whispered. "I know why you didn't say more." She looked up at the sky. "I forgive you." Later that night, Josh asked her, "Will you tell people what happened?" She paused, then said, "Do you want me to?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Maybe one day." Ellie didn't write a book. She didn't call the news. She didn't explain. She simply moved back to the cabin, restored it, painted it, let the air come in again. Sometimes she'd walk the tunnel paths in silence. Other vezes, she'd leave food by the entrance, even though no one was there anymore, just in case someone else ever got lost. And sometimes, late at night, the clock would tick again, and she would hear it, the humming. Josh, still nervous, still nearby, and she would smile, because that was memory, not haunting, just the sound of something real that didn't want to disappear. One snowy morning, Ellie walked out to the mailbox. Inside, a postcard, no stamp. Just handwriting on the back, "Thank you for remembering," and a P.S. "Check the Polaroid again." She ran inside, pulled the photo from the frame. This time, when she looked closely, her grandmother was smiling for the first time. She hadn't seen the cabin since the snow swallowed her family, but now she could finally let it breathe again.